That shrub that used to explode with blooms and now barely bothers? It's not old, not sick. It's suffocating itself. Whether you save it or kill it comes down to one thing almost no gardener checks. Right now, this fall, decides which one happens. Cut the wrong shrub this week, and you don't just lose this year's blooms. You lose next year's too. Cut the right one, and you save a plant that's been quietly dying for seasons. 11 shrubs. 6 you prune this fall. Or you're locking in weaker blooms next year. Guaranteed. 5 where picking up those pruners kills next spring's flowers before they even open. Some of you have done this every fall without knowing it. One of the 6, I prune it every October like clockwork. It's the difference between a shrub that blooms 3 weeks and one that blooms 6. And the number 1 shrub on the never touch it list? It's the one almost every gardener grabs first, because it looks like it needs a haircut. It doesn't. That one mistake costs more spring blooms in this country than frost, drought, and deer combined. Here's what almost nobody explains, and it's why half the shrub pruning advice online contradicts itself. Every flowering shrub falls into one of 2 groups. That group decides everything about when you're allowed to cut it. Group 1, old wood. Next spring's flower buds are already formed, sitting inside last summer's growth right now, waiting for warm weather. Prune an old wood shrub this fall and you're not trimming it. You're cutting off next year's flowers before they show up. Gone. Not delayed. Gone. Group 2, new wood. The plant hasn't built next year's flowers yet. It grows fresh stems in spring and blooms on whatever it puts out that season. Prune a new wood shrub in fall or winter and you haven't cost it a thing. You've cleared the way for stronger growth and better blooms. 6 shrubs coming up, new wood or safe structural pruners. Cut them this fall, right now. 5 shrubs after that, old wood bloomers. Touch them before spring flowering and you're doing the plant's job for it, in the worst way possible, erasing a whole season of blooms with a pair of pruners. Number 6, spirea. Big flush of blooms early, then twiggy and tired the rest of the season? That's not spirea being spirea. Summer blooming spirea sets flowers on new wood, growth it hasn't even made yet. Right now, before it goes dormant, is your window. Give it an aggressive fall cutback, dead branches, spent blooms, old foliage, gone. Push it toward rounded, compact growth. Don't be gentle. This shrub wants a hard reset, not a haircut. Next spring, one dense, rounded shrub loaded with blooms top to bottom. Number 5. Chaste tree. This one gets away from people. Shoots up fast, throws seed heads everywhere, and in warmer zones it becomes a weed problem. Yours and your neighbors. Chaste trees bloom on new wood too. Prune now to shape it. Remove twiggy growth, thin crowded branches, clear spent flowers. That stops it from seeding, and can trigger a second round of blooms before winter. Save the structural cuts for late winter. This is a shaping pass, not a rebuild. Do it, and you get a tidier shrub and a bonus flush of purple blooms this fall, instead of a yard full of volunteer seedlings next year. Number 4. Smooth hydrangea, the Annabelle type. Giant round white mophead blooms. The symptom, after a few years, those heads start flopping, stems weaken, blooms shrink. The biology, smooth and panicle hydrangeas bloom on new wood, so fall pruning encourages new growth and buds come spring. Remove dead flower heads, cut weak or old stems, trim the whole plant back by 1/3 for shape. Leave the heavy structural cut for late winter. Do this every fall and the stems come back thicker, strong enough to hold those heavy blooms up, instead of dumping them in the dirt after a rainstorm. Quick thing before I keep going. Drop your USDA zone in the comments right now. I'm not asking for no reason. Pruning windows on some of these shrubs shift by 3, even 4 weeks, depending on where you garden. And when we get to the second half of this list, one of the never touch it shrubs behaves completely differently depending on your zone. Also subscribe to my channel for more. Number 3. Panicle hydrangea, limelight. Cone-shaped blooms instead of round mopheads. Same rule, same reason. New wood bloomer, safe to shape now. But here's the part that trips people up. Remember this. It comes back later. You have to know exactly which hydrangea you own. Bigleaf, oakleaf, and mountain hydrangea bloom on old wood. Never prune those in fall, or you strip off next year's flower buds entirely. Panicle and smooth? Go ahead. Anything else with hydrangea on the tag? Stop and check first. More on that in the second half. Number 2. Rose of Sharon. Still got those papery seed capsules hanging on from this year's blooms? That's your cue. This rule is old. 19th century pruning manuals already had it. Prune Rose of Sharon in fall after it finishes blooming, because shortly after, it starts forming new wood, and that new wood carries next season's flowers. Cut this year's growth back to 2 or 3 buds. Clean out crossing branches. Shape the silhouette. Skip it, and the shrub just gets taller and lankier every year. Blooms pushed further out of reach. Number 1. Roses. Your landscape and shrub roses. Knockout and similar types. Here's the mistake almost everyone makes. Hack them back hard in fall, or don't touch them at all and let the canes whip around all winter. Both wrong. The real reason fall pruning matters for roses isn't next year's blooms, it's survival. Wait until after the first hard frost, once the plant's dropped most of its leaves. That reduces the risk of pushing new growth right before winter. Cut back the top third of tall canes to protect them from breaking or uprooting in winter wind. Remove anything dead, diseased, or crossing. Clean up for airflow. Take off that top third. Save the real shaping cut for late winter. Do this, and your rose walks into spring intact, instead of split down the middle by a January windstorm. That's your 6. Prune those before the ground freezes, and you're not just tidying up, you're setting next year's bloom count. Quick thing before I keep going, drop your USDA zone in the comments right now. Pruning windows on some of these shrubs shift 3, even 4 weeks depending on where you garden. And when we hit the second half of this list, one of the never touch it shrubs behaves completely differently depending on your zone. Tell me now and I can answer you when I get there. All right, back to it. 6 down. Now the switch. Everything I just told you to prune, you prune because the plant hasn't built its flowers yet. It builds them fresh, on new wood, after you cut. Everything coming up next works the exact opposite way. These 5 have already built next spring's flowers. Right now, this week, those buds sit inside this year's stems, fully formed, waiting out the cold. Pick up your pruners on any of these 5 between now and late winter, and you're not shaping the plant. You're cutting off flowers that already exist. Not delayed a season, gone. And here's what makes this list dangerous. At least one of these looks almost identical to a shrub I just told you to cut. Same genus, same word on the tag. Completely different rule underground. 5 shrubs, 0 pruners. Let's go. Number 5. Forsythia. By fall, it's a wild, overgrown mess. Long, whippy branches shooting everywhere, crossing into your walkway. Every instinct says grab the loppers. Don't. Forsythia is a textbook old wood bloomer. Prune it immediately after it blooms, not during dormancy, or you sacrifice next year's flowers. Those wild branches you want to cut right now are already carrying next April's yellow blooms, formed and set since last summer. The fix: leave it alone all winter, however messy it looks. Prune hard within 2 weeks after it finishes flowering in spring. That's the only window. Miss it, and you're staring at a bare green shrub for another full year. Number 4. Weigela. Same trap, different plant. Weigela gets leggy and lopsided by fall, and gardeners reach for the shears to clean it up before winter. That cleanup is exactly what kills next year's show. Weigela sets its pink or red trumpet blooms on old wood, this past summer's growth. Cut that off now and you've removed the only wood that was ever going to flower next spring. Correct move. Wait until right after the late spring bloom fades, then prune to shape and remove a third of the oldest canes at the base for renewal. Fall's only job here: dead head, remove anything dead or diseased, nothing more. Number 3. Azalea and rhododendron. People prune these out of habit. Evergreen, looks prunable year-round. But azaleas and rhododendrons form their flower buds in mid to late summer for the following spring. By fall, those buds are already sitting visibly on every branch tip. Cut now, and you cut off the flowers that would have opened next spring. Want to check? Look at the branch tips before you touch a single stem. Swollen, slightly pointed buds mean flowers are already loaded and waiting. Prune only in that narrow window right after bloom fades in late spring, never in fall. Shape it now, and you could lose blooms for an entire year, sometimes two. Number 2, bigleaf hydrangea, the classic mophead, blue or pink depending on your soil. Remember the tag check I told you about at number 3? Here's why. Bigleaf hydrangea looks almost identical to the panicle and smooth hydrangeas you're allowed to prune right now. Same rounded shrub, same big flower clusters. But underground it plays by the opposite rule. Bigleaf, oakleaf, and mountain hydrangeas bloom on old wood. Never prune those in fall, or you risk removing flower buds already formed for next season. The tell. Bigleaf blooms are rounded mopheads or flat lace caps, not the cone-shaped clusters of panicle types. Not sure which one you own? Do nothing until it flowers next summer. Then you'll know for certain, and you can prune immediately after that bloom fades. Number 1. Lilac. Practically every American backyard has one, often planted by someone's grandmother, still blooming decades later along the same fence line. And it's the one most gardeners get wrong first, because by fall it just looks like an overgrown tangle begging to be thinned out. Lilacs are classic old wood bloomers. Prune immediately after flowering ends, not during dormancy. Next spring's fragrant clusters are already tucked inside this year's growth, invisible but fully formed. Touch it now with loppers, and you can silence an established lilac for an entire season, sometimes longer, if the cut was heavy. The only safe move, nothing, until late spring, right after the last bloom drops. Then, and only then, thin out a third of the oldest stems at the base. Keep it blooming for the next 50 years instead of the last 50. That's your 5. And this is the shrub that gets it wrong more than any other plant on this list, in almost every yard in America. I'll tell you why lilac gets me every time. The lilac at the corner of my grandmother's porch was planted the year she moved into that house. Nobody in my family remembers a single year it didn't bloom, except one. The year my uncle cleaned up the yard for her in October. Cut that lilac back hard because it looked wild, because it looked like it needed it. That spring, nothing. Not one bloom, not a single cluster, on a shrub that had flowered every year since before I was born. It came back the year after. But here's the thing nobody tells you about old wood shrubs. You don't just lose this year's flowers when you cut at the wrong time. You lose the thing that made your yard feel like your yard. One October afternoon with a pair of loppers, and a 50-year streak is gone. That's the whole reason this list exists. Not because pruning is complicated. It isn't. It's because 6 weeks of the wrong instinct can undo decades of the right plant, in the right spot, doing exactly what it was always going to do, if you just left it alone until the right moment. That's your 11. 6 to prune this fall: spirea, chaste tree, smooth hydrangea, panicle hydrangea, rose of Sharon, roses. 5 to leave alone until after they bloom next spring: forsythia, weigela, azalea, and rhododendron, bigleaf hydrangea, lilac. Get the 6 done before the ground freezes. Leave the 5 exactly where they stand. Next spring, you'll know within the first walk around your yard whether you did it right, because the shrubs that were supposed to bloom will. That's the list. I'll see you in the next one.